What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Thank you for checking out this episode of the Keep Klimbing podcast. I'm back today with my man Brian, and we are working through this blog, How to Throw a Baseball. How to Throw a Baseball, the Science of Efficiency and Performance. It's a recent blog we put out for Premier Pitching Performance, and last week, we talked about optimizing your kinematic sequence. A lot of the details that happen throughout your pitching mechanics that basically go from, generating energy, transferring that energy, and ultimately like getting it out into the baseball. And, that's bullet point number one for this blog here. Well, bullet point number two reads mobility considerations for optimal performance. And I think, that's a really, really impactful thing when we talk about throwing a baseball and how we go about training pitchers for baseball performance.
I'm just going to go ahead and plug this. If you're a pitcher out there and you're kind of just looking around, information, trying to find, go to premierpitchingperformance.com, right?
Premierpitching.com, yep.
Premierpitching.com, excuse me.
Yep.
And go to the blogs and start reading some of this stuff. The information is here. And then, see how this is the thought process here. It's basic stuff and whatnot. But then, if it moves that and it's something you feel like it'll help you, give these guys a call, man.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. The whole point of
I'm going to do that.
Yeah, thank you. The whole point of putting information, little nuggets like this out is to hopefully give people enough information to get going down the right track, and asking the right questions. And then, we hope that obviously those questions, if you see a fit that we can help you with it, we'd love to like plug in and help people with that,
I think that's, over the conversations we've had, it makes me go back and think about the things when my son was growing up in pitching and instruction and things of that nature, and just different things that I'd heard and this and that I go back to and I think, maybe do this here. I could see some things that maybe would have helped him. I love this mobility thought process and just the basic understanding of being athletic, throwing from an athletic thought process. As any athlete, if you're stiff, if you're rigid, if you don't have fluidity, I think it can be detrimental.
Yeah, amen. And everybody kind of, moves a little bit differently, and definitely, we talk about things, all of the things that we look at, measure, characterize, like happen kind of on a spectrum, that you've got stiff movers and you've got like a little bit more free, loose, immobile movers, and there's really no real right way versus wrong way. I think it's all about like maybe identifying who you are. And I think there's certain instances where we'll look at biomechanics and information on a biomech report that, judgments basically on how a player or pitcher moves, and they're tighter or in a window where, outside of an optimal range basically. And we don't prescribe a whole lot of mobility things for that particular area, simply because at the end of the day, like, there's probably a sweet spot on movement capabilities for each person, depending on how they sequence and produce force. And so the right thing is not just more mobility for every joint, for every player, right? We're not just seeking, that's kind of a non-linear is what we'd call it a non-linear correlation, where like more is not always better. Okay. So, and mobility is definitely something that's like that, and I think that's probably something that's not very widely known. I think that some of the lack of context or depth of understanding maybe in reading things like this is that, other coaches, younger coaches could get some information like this and just think that, oh yeah, I'm going to do a bunch of mobility stuff with my players. So it's like, well, it's a little bit more intentional than that,
To your point, and I think I might have mentioned this to you before, but my son was working for S2, and he was doing a lot of work. He went through all the studying and all the stuff you have to do to get your whatever that is.
Certification.
And,
Yeah.
Okay. And he studied that, went through school and all those types of things. And he says, he came to me one day and he said, Dad, I'm going through this. And he says, you know, they were talking about the hips and the pelvic bone and how it's shaped and how it sits in there. And he says, honestly, the way I was throwing, it didn't fit my body.
Mm.
And I said, what are you talking about, Justin?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, no, he says looking at this information, he said,
Yep.
I should have went about different things in a different way. It would have probably been better for me.
Yep. Yeah. That's where I could think understanding maybe movement patterns, the way players generate force.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, on this like spectrum, we talk about this, try to simplify it, you know, like one side of the spectrum we call kangaroos. They're people who are a little bit more upright, people who are a little bit more bouncy. And on the other side of the spectrum, you got gorillas, people that are a little bit stronger, squattier. Yeah, right?
Right.
Everybody's in there somewhere.
Sure. Right.
You know, like most people, I would say, are towards the middle of it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
but then you definitely got people that towards the ends. But I think understanding maybe who you are as a person is first and foremost. And I think maybe the flaw in how, you know, we mass produce pitching instruction, really any type of instruction, sports performance specifically, is that you try to teach like certain ways and strategies that are, you know, good for certain demographics of people. And, you know, we end up teaching a lot of movement patterns that, you know, and this is usually how it happens, you know, and from a great place in everybody's heart, I do believe, you know, that like this is what worked for me.
Sure.
Okay. And I'm going to teach you what I learned in my experiences. But if you're not a mover on the same side of that spectrum as me, you're beating a dead horse and it's not going to work for you. And maybe you do it. And this is kind of blows people's minds, I think, when we start to talk about this. Maybe we do it. And then in the short term, you see success, because generally speaking, really good practice routines and really good, when you try to get better at younger ages, you typically get better, right?
Right.
It's more about not in the micro instance that you might not find success in that. It's about the big picture of the ceiling and opportunity. Is that like in the short term, doing something like that, you know, with a good detailed practice plan, probably going to get better still, even if you're not moving the most optimal way for you, but it's definitely shrinking your ceiling of what you could achieve in the pitcher and the person you could become. And so when I think you take like a much more like zoomed out approach of that, and, you know, we talk about it with like youth training and maybe looking at that stuff under a magnifying glass, is that to me, when I teach my son how to be a good whatever he's doing, if he does baseball, then cool, I'll help, you know.
Right.
I'm not a pusher like that.
But if he's playing basketball,
I mean, that it's the same philosophy, right? Like to me, if we're just playing it to have fun, then have as much fun as you can. That's great, you know. If we get into this separate category of like, okay, you want to go play in college, you want to be the best that you can be at this, and, you know, we're not just doing this because we like to have fun on the weekends playing ball or whatever, right? Like that's totally cool. And if that's how baseball fits into his life, I think that'll be great, you know?
It's fine.
Amen,
Exactly.
right? But if not, and we want to be the best that we can be, okay, at anything, what you do at age 10, 11, 12 needs to have that maybe in mind of like putting me in the best place to achieve goals at 16, 17, 18. And then again at, you know, 20, 21, 22. And we get so short-sighted, I think, on things that we can probably get fooled that short-term success equals long-term success. And that's just not always the case, you know. And I think that's a tough place to be for a parent who's like really trying to pursue putting their player or their kid in the best place they can be.
Because I think it's difficult, you know, just looking at that 11 and 12, all of a sudden he grows 6 inches and he's 14. His body, I mean, that's a difficult process.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you deal with that, you know? Because if you have that plan, you got to, if they're on the shorter side and all of a sudden, boom, 6 inches, sometimes these kids don't know how to move. They struggle with their body, correct?
Yep. When you just can't rush some of those things.
Right.
You know, the mobility considerations for optimal performance for a pitcher in that instance, like you just can't rush a lot of these things. And I think everybody's like this, and it's getting more and more, I think, these days with instant gratification and social media and attention things, right?
Mm-hmm.
That like, you know, you might do some things in that instance that you may not see the impact or effects of for a year, 18 months, 24 months on down the line. That it's just more zoomed out than that, though, to like put a player in a better chance to actually achieve his big picture goals. That, if we just wanted to like get down to like, some pitching mechanics that may not be the way that you move or move right, like just so that we can, throw as hard as we can this year. That's usually what the argument usually comes around. Instead of like,
Right.
14, you want to throw as hard as you can, you want to throw as many strikes as you can, you want to win as many games as you can, you want to stay as healthy as long as you can. I get all that, and that's everybody's goals when they come through a place like this. But not at the detriment of the ceiling, if that makes sense,
Well,
and the longevity.
let me ask you this, and I think to your point, and this is something I believe in. I don't have science or anything back up. It's just what I see when I look in general at things.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about an 11, 12-year-old, you're talking big picture, 16, 17, 18.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about mobility, movement.
Mm-hmm.
And right there, that's the thing. We want these kids to throw max effort and whatnot. And you have a kid that can throw the ball across the plate, maybe not throw as hard as this kid over here, but we're more focused on the velocity than we are.
Yeah.
He's throwing strikes. Let me help him continue to develop how to pitch and allow the rest of it to come.
Okay.
And I think there's no balance in that in just looking across the spectrum here with the kids, right?
Agreed. We were just talking about this past week, because I think the same thing can be true for hitters, right? A lot of people are
Agreed.
talking about exit velocity and bat speed these days.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And those being like trackable KPIs for hitters. Well, I think the best way to go about any of that is to, because the flaw in it, let's talk about the flaw in it first,
Okay.
right? Like as a hitter or a pitcher, is that if I'm just chasing velocity and the ball's not going where I want it to go, then that doesn't really matter, right? You've heard the term coined, like, no one cares how hard you throw a ball for. Like, I actually think that's fundamentally not true, but I get the point. And if I'm your coach or your teammate, I sure as heck don't care, but unfortunately evaluators at some instances do care about it.
Right.
More so than maybe perceived. But then like for the exit velocity, right? If you don't hit the ball square, then no, I don't care how hard you swing, like, so yeah, swing as hard as you want. But if there's more holes in your swings and you're not connecting with, I think the best way to go about it is to take the hitting example, right? Take your contact quality and as hard as I can swing with good contact quality, I get a better hitter. As hard as I can throw with good command, I get a better pitcher, right?
Absolutely.
And strikes make the game go round.
Yep.
Like squared up contact makes good hitters, like,
right.
So now I will say that I think there's months of the year where the training goals are different. Where
I would agree.
September, October, November, and we're trying to build some fundamental traits to basically just build a better engine inside of an athlete.
Don't worry about the result.
Yeah, throw into the wall with a plyo ball, right?
Yeah.
Like, yes, but in March, no. Like, no one's going to care if you're throwing real hard and it's going off the backstop and you make it 4 hitters and the coach has to pull you. Like, that's against the – and the same thing. Like, no one cares what your bat speed is if you're not hitting the ball hard. But they start to care what your bat speed is when you hit the ball square, don't they?
Yes.
Same thing for a pitcher. No one cares really how hard you're throwing it. And I'll caveat that a little bit because I do think people still look at how hard people throw and say, ooh, there's potential with that. Right?
Agreed.
They say there's potential.
Agreed.
But really, truthfully, go back to the coaches and the teammates and the hitter in the box. Like, if I stood up in the box and you threw 112 miles an hour, but I had a pretty good chance that if I just sat this bat on my shoulder and didn't get hit by the dead gum pitch, that I'd go to first base. I don't care that you throw 112 anymore, So yeah, I mean, those are kind of the fundamental truths about the game.
Exactly.
And that like for us, I think we get mixed in with a lot of like training facilities that like talk about like your pitch graders, your pitch models. You got all this stuff like Stuff Plus these days. You got all these numbers basically to say or suggest like it's a composite score, like a Madden score, right? Like his fastball, think about like in the video games, his fastball scores at a 97. Well, he's got a really good fastball then, right? So we've got all these like graders basically, and we were talking about this, kind of extensively this past week. It's like, well, holy cow, the best grader for how good a fastball is the hitter in the box, is like whiff percentage, swing and misses, right?
Right.
Because if guys swing and miss at your pitch, like that's a really good pitch. I don't really care what the TrackMan says,
Right.
because the TrackMan is, but the point of those Stuff Plus models that I think people forget about is that they're just meant to be predictors, right? Because we have data here that suggests if you do it like this, then we're trying to predict your success on the field. But really, the best grader of your pitch is whiff percentage. And really, I'll say even more specifically is in zone whiff percentage. Because if you're throwing strikes and the guy still can't hit it, we're taking the chase, element out of it. If I'm throwing a breaking ball and I'm throwing it for strikes and you're still swinging and missing at it, that's a really good breaking ball.
It's a good pitch.
If you're swinging and missing at my breaking ball that's not in the zone, still probably a good pitch.
Yeah.
But the reason you're swinging at it outside of the zone either is because you chase a lot out of the zone and it's nothing to do because of what I did, or I sequenced it really well to get to there and you thought it was a fastball down and away and I landed a good pitch and then I bounced the breaking ball and you were like, oh crap, and you were trying to reach to hit the fastball. So you take that element out of it, in zone whip percentage, holy cow, that's the best grader of if a pitch is good or not. But those other things are meant to be predictive. And I guess the whole point of is what we try to do is work from the field backwards, not trying to look through a magnifying glass or through a vacuum on all of this stuff. But yeah, when we're looking at a guy in January, there is no hitter in the box. We have nothing else to grade this pitch and its effectiveness other than those predictive scores, that's how we use them. But at the end of the day, we try to have conversations to be like, yeah, the hitter will let you know, so the hitter will let you know.
It's all about projectability and seeing trying to see as much into the future with the data as you can, right?
Yeah. You're trying to predict outcomes on the field based off of what's historically been true, that, a fastball at 94 miles an hour with 19 plus inches of induced vertical break, which is just be carry or ride or hop that we would call it as baseball guys. Those perform really well. You know what I mean? Those historically perform really well. So you could see that on a TrackMan and be like, that's got a pretty good chance to be a good pitch. That is a good pitch, for sure. Right. That's historically been a good pitch. And the only reason we need that though is because in a training environment, when I'm practicing, when I'm throwing my bullpens, in between week bullpens or whatever, you don't have a hitter in the box to give you feedback,
Right. And I got to go back to this because it popped in my head. I'm sorry, coming back to, we were talking about pitchers. So you're saying ball four, as a coach, you're sitting there, you're like, this kid, you got the kid on deck and he says he just threw 8 balls in a row.
Yeah. Do not swing the bat till he throws 2 strikes probably.
Yes. Right. You're going to sacrifice 2 strikes because I don't believe he can throw 2 in a row.
Yeah. And that's not effective. That's not effective. So I think, we'll get back to some of the mobility stuff, but as far as like that specific stuff is concerned, I think like your best route is always to work off the field and work backwards. You're trying to use data to, make more success on the field. And without success on the field, it doesn't really matter. That if you find yourself in a place, where you're getting a pat on the back for, and I mean, it is a win because building performance metrics, and so I don't mean to be too harsh or cruel about that, is that like, it is a huge win. Like I build our entire system around performance metrics that our coaches need to be focusing on to, show and prove to these athletes improvements that they make or need to make. You know what I mean?
Right.
So but at the end of the day, like, yeah, I mean, the hitter will let you know. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like if you're hitting the ball hard, like you're in a really good spot.
Absolutely.
But I will say all of those things together. Like I said, if the contact quality is there, people start to care more about what your bat speed looks like. if the strike throwing's there, people start to care about how much more you're throwing, how much harder you're throwing. But but for all of these things, maybe to tie it back into like some optimal performance, get back into the mobility conversation here. Like the first line of this, I think, is super critical because we talked last week about like the kinematic sequence and biomechanics.
Yes,
Okay,
right.
Biomechanics. That first line says biomechanics is as much about range of motion as it is about strength. Okay, we need to be able to like move explosively, but the easiest way to describe this is with a rubber band. If I've got a big, tight rubber band, okay, think about the big, thick ones, right? Like it's a lot of force to pull that sucker back, but how much that one needs to get pulled back to shoot the same amount of distance is different than the little skinny one that I got to pull real far back because it's got a lot of elasticity in it, right? So you got that big tight one. Well, the tight one like generates more force in a tight window. So think about your movers that way, right? And then the other guy is a big loose rubber band that you get pulled back real far because it's flappy till you get it to about right here.
That's right.
So that's the spectrum that I mean to like articulate about that. But that the tension in the band, the tension in the athlete is just as important, and it's all relative to the amount of the range of motion that the athlete can operate in.
So when you're talking about the tension in the athlete, is that mostly muscle or is that tendon? What is it?
Yeah.
All of it?
Tendon,
it's all of it.
Fascia. It's just the way you're made, like I think like we talked about like the kangaroo and gorilla like spectrum. A lot of people like are in the middle, so sometimes that can be gray on like how you identify those people, but everybody's just always talked about these athletes being like a real whippy athlete or a real like strong or bulkier athlete. Like you've seen them your whole life, So we start to put like categories of these things together. We call them archetypes. Okay, we put categories together like this, and certain types of athletes need to spend more time training certain ways.
Right.
Okay, and then you can boil that all the way down to like, then sinker slider guys need to spend more time working on these things, and four seam curveball guys need to spend more time thinking about working on these things. So the same thing's true for mobility considerations, is that at the end of the day, you've got that tight band. Okay, I mean, really just the point of the rubber bands, that the rubber bands, think about those as your pitchers. And if we have a tight mover or a thick rubber band, if you pulled that one back as far as some of the others, you try to create more mobility,
it might snap.
The band's going to break.
Yeah.
The band's going to break, or I mean, at the end of the day, it's not going to function the same way. And I think that's the point, is that it's just as much about range of motion as strength, but it's all relative and how you go about accomplishing that. So what most people do incorrectly is they go to internet and they hear things like this. They hear a podcast like this.
Right.
Mobility is good for pitchers. And it is a certain amount of mobility. And they go to internet and they find mobility workouts for pitchers. And then they're out there doing all these different mobility drills because, well, these are good mobility drills. 100%. I can go on the internet right now and find T-spine rotation things.
You bet.
And go out there and hammer that every single day. Well, what if you're a mover that doesn't need more T-spine mobility? It's incomplete.
And that's the thing.
It lacks context.
Right.
It lacks the context necessary for the optimal performance.
I love that.
Yeah.
Context.
Yeah.
Everything is in context. You can hear a soundbite and take it completely out of the context of what was the whole narrative being said. And I think that, to me, that's the biggest problem with a lot of these things. And we do shorts.
Yeah.
We put stuff out, but the reason we put the shorts out is we want you to go back. We hope it grabs your attention. That's the point of it. Hey, here's what we're talking about.
Yep.
Go watch the whole episode.
Yep.
Inform yourself. You can't, I don't believe you can learn anything from a soundbite. No, you just can't. It's got to be the whole package or else you're incomplete.
Yep. Amen. So that's where like some of these things then are backlinked. It's important to understand the importance of mobility in throwing, its effects in baseball performance, right? Like we've written other things. So hopefully when you read this about mobility, you can go in and read more specifically about mobility and throwing and its effect on baseball performance. So you can dive a little bit deeper on mobility considerations for optimal performance, because I do believe that if you just read this and you said, oh, I'm going to go do a bunch of mobility, because the next line says a lack of mobility can limit a pitcher's performance and increase injury risk. Pay attention to these areas. So, the things that are listed is hip flexibility, shoulder range of motion, spinal rotations. Now, all things that are fundamentally true about all pitchers, right? But if you're a person that reads this and says, well, I'm just going to go do a bunch of hip flexibility stuff and I'm going to become a better pitcher. Like, no, it lacks the context. It lacks the surrounding context of how you other areas of your body move and perform that you may not need. Maybe, hey, look, maybe you're a person that reads this and you've got too much hip flexibility. What do you do to shorten hip flexibility cycles? Well, it's stability. You want stability in the joints, right? Like, so you actually might do more hip strengthening stuff.
That's what I was going to say. You got to build a muscle, right?
Yeah, mobility is not always a good thing. It's not linear. So those are some of the things that more mobility, I should say, right? Like a certain amount of mobility is good, but the fix for that is not everybody to just do more mobility exercises.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So now, I mean, a lot of times, yeah, we do spend time prescribing mobility. I would say most guys have some type of mobility goal that they can achieve.
Yeah.
But it's not just more mobility in every joint improves you as a pitcher type of thing.
When you're looking at this, you've got hip, shoulder, and spinal. I mean, hip, I understand because you're always rotating and whatnot. The shoulder, of course, you don't, this part of it here, I think is the thing that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it was Tommy John surgery is where it's at.
Yeah.
How does this, it's one part. I know it's just one part, and we've talked about these things as far as your body and how it is. When you're talking to somebody about staying healthy, there's a kid, most of these kids, I want to stay as healthy as possible, whatnot. It almost seems that sometimes it's just going to be inevitable. It's just when.
Injuries.
For injuries. And I think that's true. There's very few people that go through a career without an injury. It's just the reality of it.
Sure.
But how do you keep that from, where do these things fit within that construct that are about the injury prevention part?
Yeah. Well, I would say most of the mobility stuff, like kind of really any movement capabilities, starts with being able to optimize performance in that like rubber band conversation. But then it evolves into staying within a good range for you that, a lot of times there's like flags, a lot of times like any type of overhead flexion or lack of external rotation, like with your arm or shoulder, would suggest that like you've got a little bit of a movement deficiency going on and could be signs of fatigue, and that's what comes before injuries, right? Okay. So yeah, all of those things, I think you try to build up the movement capabilities, and then you try to keep them in a really good range, because as you start to play or perform or fatigue sets in, like your mobility is not something that like, just like strength. I mean, right? You got to like keep going with it, and there's ebbs and flows, like strength is maybe a little bit different in my head without a lot of in-depth like time to think about it on the spot here, that mobility is probably something that is very, very fluid, like you probably have certain areas that you move and struggle with, just because it's the way you were born, but then you probably also have, areas that are like problem areas for you as an individual, where like I would get sore very specifically, like right here, and I'd get sore right here, like in very specific spots. So like you'd spend a lot of time like resetting that every single day. We actually did a post not too long ago. I want to share it.
How do you mean resetting?
Yeah. I'll explain it. That's what the post is about. It's perfect. Okay. So it's an arm care post talking about your daily flow. It's release, restore,
I saw that
reset.
I watched it.
Yep. So like the idea is that you're releasing it to help like myofascial release is what it's called. You take a little
Mhm.
cross ball and basically roll out your certain areas that are like pain point areas, you know, restore, you're kind of doing some restoring of the range of motion, right? So if we're talking like specifically about shoulders, you know, like you'd be doing some like CARS, stands for controlled articular rotations, basically openers, you know, like I don't know how else to describe that other than just like you know, kind of mobility enhancers, you know, especially for like certain areas that are get like fatigued or constricted from playing. Okay.
We used to just call them windmills.
Yeah, windmills. Perfect. I mean, that's what we call them. Integrating dynamic stretches like hip openers and shoulder rolls into your warm-up routine will enhance your mobility, reduce tightness, and lower injury risk, you know? So yeah, absolutely. Right. And then at the end of it, you're doing, like we would say for this, like the restore section of it would be to like restore strength back to the area. You would do, you know, any type of like cuff strengthening or, you know, forearm strengthening or whatever, you know, types of things, depending on, you know, the day of the week and where you're at, like within your program. Obviously, you're not gonna throw a bunch and then the next day like do a bunch of like grip and forearm stuff. Like you'd probably do that a little bit later on in the week once you've had time to recover.
How long does it take, you know, when you guys start some of these processes and you're in this part of it, okay? How long does it take you really to assess in a player? Because, you know, muscle density, muscle mass, those types of things, you really don't know, because I think tendon sometimes is different in each person. You really, some of those are unknown factors.
Sure.
So how do you kind of start assessing those types of things in as far as the balance between too much muscle, not enough muscle, the you know, the rotations and things of that nature?
Really, all of those things that maybe can seem gray or abstract, you just work from the field backwards, right?
Okay.
So like, can this player move his body efficiently down the mound? And his force production, his kinematic sequence, and his biomechanics like will tell us that, you know. And if
Okay.
he's not moving fast enough down the mound and there's a body comp thing that's out of whack there, that's probably an easy. Now, I don't want to make it sound like
it's an indicator,
simple,
right?
It's a simple, you know, black and white adjustment that he can make. Not to say that adjusting your body comp is easy by any means, you know, but
Right.
you know, lose 20 pounds, you're gonna move a whole lot cleaner down the mound probably, and vice versa, gain 20 pounds. I tell you, we see a bunch of kids got really good arms, 14, 15 years old. It's like, man, hey, you slap 40 pounds on that kid, he's probably pretty big, but you know, pretty good picture, you know. Pretty good. If you just leave him alone,
Eat a sandwich.
Yeah, that's right. I tell guys all the time, I go eat a cheeseburger and get on that squat rack. I'll see you in 2 years, you know. Joking, obviously, of course.
No, I get it.
But yeah, I mean, you slap 40 pounds. I mean, we got, honestly, especially down in Fenton, Andrew's got a couple of fantastic young arms down there. A couple of them go to MICDS, some of these schools like around here. Got some really good young up and coming arms that I've got to see over the last couple of weeks. And yeah, them specifically, it's like, yeah, man, yeah, I mean, it's just like 140 pounds. Like you just slap 40 pounds on that kid and he's probably really good when he's a junior or senior, you know, so.
I appreciate you opening the door for that.
Yeah.
That was a great segue, because now I got to ask you.
Yeah.
Because we just finished up our Class 6 top 20 rankings, YBM.
Yep.
You know, I know you don't necessarily just know all the kids and things like that.
Yeah.
But off the top of your head, if you know, what are some of these kids from some of these schools you think are going to make an impact this year?
Yeah. We've got a really good group of seniors this year, I think. I think locally in St. Louis, there seems to be a pretty wide, you know, talent range. Not wide, but like a pretty quality like talent range of some of these 2025 arms. You know, some kids going to some fantastic schools. I think what I've been kind of impressed by the most this year, though, is just how good of people a lot of them are. You know, first and foremost, and I think they're intentional, they're hardworking, they're high character. You know, people.
Yeah.
But getting to know a few of these kids, Brian Gould's one.
I like
really
Brian
really
Gould
great
a lot.
kid,
Yeah.
really good pitcher. Excited for him coming back off of you know, an arm injury in previous years. Cam Lohman has kind of come onto the scene here. Cam goes to Fort Zumwalt North, and you know, has been a late bloomer, I guess you could say, in general. But you know, he's late bloomer on a national scale, probably not late bloomer in a local scale, but up to 97 in the lab this winter, so but yeah, I mean a bunch of kids truthfully, that I feel like have worked really hard, put themselves in a really good fun position that I've talked to and encouraged just to understand that it just means very little in the big scheme of things. That if they were listening to this, like I'd tell them again that just like, everything you've done up till now, like, is a cool, cool thing that you should be proud of, no doubt about, like, where you put yourself, because now you've put yourself in a conversation and opportunity to achieve a lot of what you wanted to do, but that really, truthfully, anything of what you've done up until this point, like, just means nothing, it just means nothing. And big picture wise, that nothing of what I do today, like, impacts what I do tomorrow in baseball, like, you're just always in a spot where you, like, got to prove yourself. You got to execute. And man, from my experience, like, the minute you have it figured out, like, this game gets you, this game
You're
gets
done.
you.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, some players locally definitely excited to get out and see this spring once games get rolling. And we've had such beautiful weather here in St. Louis this week. That's got me itching for sure, but I'm going to pop out and see a few guys this week. Practice. So
I'm looking forward to it. There's some big time arms going through the state. I'm looking forward to. I don't know if we're going to get to see him on that particular date because I don't know how their schedule works, whatnot. But I'm hoping that we would get to see Tyler Wood.
Yep.
Over at Lee Summit West.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Heard great things about him. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and over. Another young man, we recorded it. It'll be coming out soon. But another young man I really like. I really enjoyed the conversation. And this is something, as you get to, I think the makeup here has a lot of these factors, right?
Amen.
As you were saying. But Brody Earlbeck out of Staley going to Iowa.
Nice, yeah.
Really enjoy good conversation. He has a good idea what he wants to do and how he wants to do it.
Yeah, good.
And I saw him pitch last year
Yep.
against Liberty North, and the kid is really good.
Yeah.
He's really good. So just on that side, and then down south, and I don't know who you guys were. I may be adding names, but I'm hoping. Don't know because it's on a Thursday, so he might have already pitched. But either way, I think his name's Workowitz.
Okay.
Out at Oakville. I've heard some good things about him. There's CJ Lake down there at Oakville.
Yeah, I've heard CJ's name.
And then Adam Kilburn, of course.
Yeah. He's going to Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of really good arms all across
That's on
the state. I know, right? All the way across the state. A lot of them in St. Louis too, so there'll be some fun games to catch this spring.
When you look at the landscape of the high school pitching today, what do you attribute that to?
Well, I would say first and foremost, it ebbs and flows. I think we're in a high year right now. I think we're in a high year right now, and it's just coincidental, to be honest with you, in my opinion. But obviously, like, everything's starts to tick up every 5 years. You look at it.
It's cyclical.
When you look at like big picture and you zoom out, like, I mean, I can simply just remember that throwing 90 in high school like made you a Division I commit, and you were fantastic. Now there's gonna be like, I don't even know, 20 kids this year that across St. Louis that throw 90. Like, it's just not the same feat. I think in general you see it all going up across baseball. I think first and foremost the reasoning behind it is because we just value it in baseball, right? What you emphasize, like, is what people are gonna value, and so evaluators are valuing it more. Like, they always used to come to like radar guns to the games, but it seems to be more and more and more like as the years go on. At the end of the day, velocity just helps you make more mistakes and get away with them.
Especially at the high school level.
Yeah, especially at high school level. So it's all relative, right? Like that mistake worthy velocity in the big leagues is 100. You know what I mean? So 98 to 102, I guess, these days. So, but in high school, I mean, that used to be probably 88 to 91, you know, and now it's probably 93 to 95, you know, like, because it's all relative, and you know, hitters' eyes are trained to what they see more often. That like we always joke and say above the hitting speed or below the hitting speed, you know, like the hitting speed's relative, but it's hard to hit. I think the further you get away from average, and every pitch is that way, whether it's, you know, more movement or less movement, or, you know, more speed or less speed, or, you know, a certain release that is way, you know, away from average. Because just the more you see it, just the easier it gets to track. You know, if everybody threw like a cricket pitcher way up overhead, then the guy who threw like sidearm would just be like a total outlier and be totally hard to hit. So it's all relative, you know, it's all relative. But no, I would say the biggest thing is that we that's what we value. And then because of what we value, especially with all the data and technology we have these days, you can see and get better at, and just spend more time working on things that the evaluators value, you know, because if the evaluators tomorrow all started valuing a certain pitch type, like think about how crazy like sweepers got a couple years ago, you know, and then everybody has sweeper, you know, like, so it just, you know, it just kind of drives the decisions that people make all the way down through training that, you know, affects all the way down to the lowest levels, because it's such a snowball effect that, like, truthfully, what the major league evaluators value is going to affect the AAA guys, and that's going to affect AA, and that's going to affect this, and that's going to affect this, and it's going to affect the draft.
And it's just a trickle down.
It's going to affect the draft, and the draft's going to affect the college, and then college is going to do the sophomores and the freshmen, and the, you know, all the way down to every single level of college. And then, you know, the barrier for entry to get into college baseball went up or was adjusted, right? So then it's going to affect high school guys, and then, well, the barrier for entry then affected the high school guys, so then now it's affecting the middle school guys. Like, that's just how it works, you know. It's just how it works. The more information and technology is getting out there, that it helps maybe expedite the learning process for all of those people to spend more time training economy, spend more time, you know, working on things that, you know, the people who are above you value.
That's why I really enjoy this blog. It struck me because, and I said this, and I did a show with Mitch from his place on his podcast, The Hitting Zone. And, you know, when I'm reading these things and we're talking here, mobility considerations, you can, you know, we're talking about, you know, a 10 to 12-year-old and whatnot. If you're a dad and whatnot, and you're starting to look at these things, your son goes, yeah, Dad, I want to pitch. You can take and look at this and start a journey. Don't start thinking of a result. Well, he's got to throw 95. Stop that. Don't. That to me is what this is. This can walk you through a basic journey on how to get to where you want to go, because development isn't a race. It's a journey through that process, because your son's going to continue to grow. You have no idea where he's going to end up physically. And so now you have a process in which you can kind of go, okay, all right, here's some things, and then start looking at how those things operate and finding the right advice and balancing everything that way.
Amen. It's process versus outcome. You know, I already know, just from my own experience, I already know what every single pitcher's outcome goals are, right? Every single one of them wants to throw harder, wants to throw more strikes, and wants to stay healthier, right? How they go about that is a little bit different based off the person. But when they come into a training environment like ours, like, I already know what you want out of this. What we spend a lot of time trying to do, and the whole maybe purpose of all of our data and all of our meetings and whatever, is to help them find better process-oriented goals that help them achieve their bigger picture outcomes. Because very rarely do I have to, you know, it's like the coach yelling from the dugout, just have strikes, you know, like,
guilty.
So yeah, I mean, holy cow, yeah, me too. I've yelled it from the outfield, you know, so no doubt. But the point is that, like, yeah, I already know that's the goal for everybody. Everybody's way more interested in, like, well, how do I get there, right? Well, how do I get there? So we look at, like, process and performance based metrics to say, okay, well, if I do this and I do this and I do this and I do this, that's going to help me get closer to my outcome goal. You know, and I think that's big picture the point, just trying to get people better process, you know, focus on the process.
Absolutely,
so,
man.
Yeah, that's good wisdom, I think, for everybody doing anything what they're trying to accomplish. Like, you know, you have some type of big picture goal, But you got to see the first couple steps, I think, to start taking steps towards that goal,
Yeah.
you know, no matter what you're doing. So. All right, well, that's all we got time for today. Thank you guys for checking out this episode. If you like it, drop us a like, a comment, something below here, this video, and love to interact and engage with it. You could drop any type of future what am I saying? Podcast? Yeah, future podcast. I almost said blog, but I'm staring at a blog. So future podcast topics, or if you have a blog topic that you'd like, that'd be fantastic too. And we'll catch you guys next time. And thanks again for checking out this video.